You want me to put that on my Tudor?
Harry's wife making a pass at Charles. It has been suggested that Harry's wife has made a pass at King Charles. Not necessarily, of course, when he was king. She's had very little involvement with him, if any, since he was crowned, but rather prior to this, when he was the Prince of Wales. For this to happen, what would the individual concerned require? Well, first of all, the individual would be somebody who was willing to interfere in the relationship of another person. Namely, they would interfere in the fact that person is in a relationship and is married, and therefore that individual has no issue with intruding upon the supposed sanctity of that marriage. A narcissist has no concerns in that regard. Indeed, I'd encourage you to watch my video, The Married Target, to learn more in that regard. The narcissist doesn't care about somebody else being married because the narcissist doesn't recognize any boundaries, and that, of course, includes Harry's wife. Furthermore, she would not have to care about the fact that she would be committing an act of infidelity with regard to her own husband, the intimate partner primary source, old Ginger Bollocks. Again, Harry's wife as a narcissist has no due regard for how her behaviour impacts upon him. She's not interested. If her narcissism causes her to seek out somebody else, whether it's flirting with them, whether it's dropping down to her knees and this time not sobbing, but rather engaging in a bit of gobble-gobble, and I'm not talking about the turkeys or chickens, then in actual fact, she will get on and do it. She has no conscience. She has no concept of guilt. One can be manufactured, of course, by her narcissism so that a narcissist, particularly a mid-range one, will say, oh, I feel so guilty for what I've done. But no narcissist ever experiences guilt. It's just an artifice. Therefore, the individual would have to act with a sense of entitlement. But moreover, it would be necessary for the intimate partner primary source to be in devaluation. So if a pass was made at Charles, this would not have taken place when it was the golden period. Now, for Harry, he met her in 2016, and invariably the golden period can last for anything, roughly between 6 to 18 months. Let us assume that it lasts until they were married, which would roughly take us to 18 months after they met. Sometimes it can last a little bit longer, and therefore it's likely that the sustained devaluation would have occurred a month or two post-marriage. This would make sense also because her narcissism would know that he was completely under control by virtue of marriage. And it's at this juncture, when he's in devaluation, that the narcissism causes her to behave in a way where she doesn't exhibit any care or compassion for him. Prior to that, her care and compassion is generated as a consequence of her narcissism making her believe that she cares about him, that she wants to look after him, that she wants to protect him, etc. But it is just generated and isn't genuine. But once she has entered that sustained devaluation, then that's when he's devalued, he's insulted, he's triangulated in a malign fashion, rather. He's called bad names, he's smeared elsewhere, and of course it raises the possibility of her cheating. Given the fact that she's a mid-range narcissist, you're not going to, surprising as it may sound, find her getting rutted in an alleyway off the Strand. You're not going to find somebody giving her a back scuttle down Middle Temple Lane and she's going, oh yeah, give it to me, big boy. Such behaviours would be done in a more covert fashion commensurate with the necessity of maintaining a facade. Indeed, at that juncture, she may not have been playing hide the sausage with anybody, but that's not going to stop her making eyes at people, batting the eyelashes, being overly tactile, being suggestive, giving those coquettish giggles. Why? Because remember, in the world of Harry's wife, it works like this. Every man, and I mean every man in her deluded world wants to backscuttle her. Every man wants to make the beast with two backs, discuss Ugandan affairs, play hide the sausage. And every woman wants to be like her because she's amazing and stylish and a fashion icon. The fact is that because Harry's wife's default setting is when she meets a man, she automatically thinks he fancies me, she doesn't act upon it in any meaningful fashion during the golden period. But when it comes to the sustained devaluation, there is then an increased risk that she will do so, ranging from anything from flirtation through to kissing somebody, engaging in some form of sexual intimacy, all the way through to a full-blown affair. It very much depends upon the circumstances. For Harry's wife, she doesn't recognise any boundaries. She doesn't respect the marriage of the king with Camilla. Indeed, it's likely that Camilla would be painted black as a consequence of the things that Harry had said and also her own dealings with her. So not only has she no emotional empathy for Camilla or Charles, but actively she would enjoy the idea of getting one over on Camilla. Now you might think to yourself, ugh, Charles, he's way older. That isn't something that's going to stand in the way of Harry's wife. Because where her narcissism compels her to be flirtatious with somebody, they could look like a lump of lard, but she views them through the lens of being painted white. Now, that also is through, of course, her somatic lens, and therefore she's more likely to want to look upon somebody that is buffed and ripped and really good looking, which may then cause you to say, well, why did you choose Prince Harry? Well, there, the necessity of what he brought to the party by way of character traits, fuel, ease of control, and of course, huge residual benefits outweighed the fact that he looks like a ginger scrotum. However, similarly, with Charles, he's not a good-looking chap at all, and he's old. However, her narcissism would override that, because the benefit that would be obtained, namely the provision of fuel by way of a response, thought fuel about getting one over on Camilla, the necessity of indirect assertion of control over Harry, would mean that her narcissism could well drive her to do it. She's not bothered about the fact that it's her father-in-law. Indeed, you will have heard of instances within a family dynamic, usually seen on Jeremy Kyle and programs of such like, where a woman has ended up sleeping with her father-in-law, much to the frustration, hurt, and annoyance of her husband. And often, but not always, but often, it's because she's a narcissist that doesn't recognise those boundaries, functions with a lack of emotional empathy. Accordingly, it's very much in the skill set, if you will, in the dynamic, in the DNA of Harry's wife, to be flirtatious with anybody that she meets, to think that they want to bed her, and it would be no different with Charles. He would be a non-intimate secondary source, but could be shifted to an intimate partner secondary source as a consequence of her behaviours towards him. Furthermore, the thought fuel that she would gain from such activity, she wouldn't necessarily be looking, of course, to draw him in the sense of making him the intimate partner primary source, but it would provide certain advantages to her for the purposes of the assertion of control, the drawing of fuel, etc. She would also likely utilise it by way of flirtatious and making a pass at him in order to get special treatment, to curry favour, and in particular with regard to her favourite residual benefit, money. There's no hard evidence to confirm that she ever made a pass at Charles. However, based upon the way that she behaves, the way that her narcissism directs her behaviour, her absence of emotional empathy, the lack of boundary recognition, the interference in relationships, her sense of entitlement, her lack of accountability for her behaviour, her general mindset of all men fancy me so everybody's game, means that I would see that there would be a strong probability that she would have flirted in some way with Charles. He might not have picked up on it, and it would be positive fuel provided towards him, which wouldn't be a threat to control for that to occur. But I see it as likely that this happened. I don't see that it went anything further than her making eyes and being flirtatious at him, perhaps giving him the wink and the nod. But nevertheless, I see, given her makeup and the way that she triangulates people, that this is likely to have happened. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.